Ruslan.
All right, so things have hit the fan with Joe Rogan regarding some of his comments using the N-word on this video. I'm going to tell you guys the entire backstory of how this got here, which is actually really interesting. I'm going to give you guys my thoughts and ultimately what I think can be helpful and what I think is toxic and dangerous with regards to this whole conversation. So if you're watching this, appreciate you being here. Check out some of the links in the description. We have a free How to Study the Bible course along with a free Find Your Niche training if you are looking to get into the creator space. Rogan, trending on Twitter, he put out an apology. We're gonna look at that apology here in just a moment. But before we do that, we gotta give you guys some context in terms of what is going on. How did we get here? Obviously, there's been a ton of controversy with some of his guests on the channel. Now, I made a video earlier basically saying I'm not a fan of the guests. I'm not a fan of the two doctors that he's had on the channels. And I think there needs to be more dialogue, especially on his platform, with regards to the panoramic and that whole thing. And he issued a statement, basically said, yeah, I could do a better job of having more balanced views, so on and so forth. But this opened him up to a ton of criticism from artists, first starting with Neil Young, taking their music off the catalog. Spotify stock took a huge hit, and now it's extended to other artists. One of those artists, the other artist, is India Arie. If you don't know who India Arie is, she's a super dope neo-soul artist from, I'd say, the early 2000s. I believe it or not, bought her album, her very first album, super dope. I think I bought her first and second album. My wife is a big fan, so on and so forth. So India Arie said, hey, I'm pulling my music from Spotify because they're taking the revenue from artists and they're giving guys like Joe Rogan a $100 million licensing deal, and they're paying artists 0.3 of a penny. Now, I'm gonna tell you something regarding that and something that she's missing there before we get to this Joe Rogan clip. She's absolutely right. Spotify pays artists trash. It is so bad what artists get paid on Spotify. One of the reasons why I'm doing this and not still releasing music, okay? So with regards to that, she's right. They do pay artists very, very, very poorly. However, I don't know if she quite understands the mechanics and revenue side of why podcasts generate more money. It's mainly because even as a premium Spotify user, you can have ads on these podcasts, Academics podcast, Joe Rogan podcast, so they can squeeze more out of it. The user watches more, they're more active listener, and you can put more ads. And so it's honestly an economics thing, but it is telling to say, hey, you guys pay artists a third of a penny per stream, and yet you're dropping these big checks on these podcasters buying up podcast studios. She has a very valid point. I think she's right in that. I think she should pull her music, and I think she did the right thing if that's her conviction. Now, with regards to this Joe Rogan thing, I'm gonna play his apology, and then I'm gonna give you guys my 2 cents on what I think it is like a reasonable approach to all of this, especially coming from a Jesus following worldview, because this will affect us, believe it or not. Let's look at this Joe Rogan apology. I'm gonna give you guys my just raw thoughts. If you're watching this with little kids in the car, just so you guys know, this is going to have some adult words, okay? So,
had your kids, had your wife.
Explicit, explicit,
explicit.
We're gonna go from here into what is appropriate for these sorts of behaviors in terms of this dialogue in the city square, if you will. Okay, so again, it's gonna be some profanity. Here's Joe Rogan, straight off his Instagram. I'll stop, pause, talk a little bit, but there is some profanity in this. Okay. By the way, this is a second statement Joe Rogan has had to issue in the last week. I'm going to talk about that towards the end of the video, so make sure you watch till the end. This is the second one he's had to issue in the last week. The first one was about the doctors and needing to put a disclaimer on some of the controversial panoramic conversations and bang bang conversations. This is now about the video that's going viral with him using the N-word.
I'm making this video to talk about the most regretful and shameful thing that I've ever had to talk about publicly. There's a video that's out that's a compilation of me saying the N-word. It's a video that's made of clips.
Hold on real quick, guys. Okay, cool.
And out of context of me of 12 years of conversations on my podcast and it's all smushed together and it looks fucking horrible, even to me. Now, I know that to most people, there's no context where a white person is ever allowed to say that word, never mind publicly on a podcast. And I agree with that now. I haven't said it in years, but for a long time, when I would bring that word up, like if it would come up in conversation, instead of saying the N word, I would just say the word.
Yeah, so not okay. Not okay. Not speaking on behalf of black people, but the vast majority of my black friends are not okay with white folks even using the N-word in quote. I would say most of them aren't cool with white folks saying the N-word as they're quoting back rap lyrics, okay? And I, as myself, not as a spokesperson or as an ally for the black community or anything like that, have had multiple confrontations with some of my white friends that have said the word, whether they're using it ironically, whether they're trying to say it with the EA at the end. It is never appropriate to say the word, period, even when quoting, so on and so forth, okay? Guys, if you're watching this live, let me know how everything is sounding. I'm getting some like weird issues from the YouTube stream where the view count is like dropping from 0 to 173 to 0 to 173. So if everything is sounding and looking okay, just smash the like button and let me know where you're watching this from, okay? So Joe Rogan owns it. He says, look, in the past, I've said the word. I instead of saying the N-word, like most of us say now, I would just flat out say the word. Mind you, Joe Rogan's like 50-something years old. Maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe he's just an idiot. I don't know.
As long as it was in context, people would understand what I was doing. Like that context was part of the clip we were talking about Red Fox, how Red Fox said that word on television in the 1970s, and how times have changed so much since then. Or about how...
So somebody asked, what is exactly the N-word? It is with the ER or the A. It doesn't matter, okay? It is with the ER or the A. I think he said it both times, all right? And so, anyway, let's keep watching.
Richard Pryor used it as...
He said it both ways, excuse me. He's talking about Richard Pryor saying it, times have changed, so on and so forth.
One of the titles of one of his albums. Or I was quoting a Lenny Bruce bit, or I was quoting a Paul Mooney bit, or I was talking about how Quentin Tarantino used it repeatedly in Pulp Fiction, or I was talking about how a Netflix executive, ironically, used it because he was trying to compare it to another offensive word, and he said it out loud, and they fired him. Not calling anybody or just saying the word out loud. I was also talking about how there's not another word like it in the entire English language, because it's a word where only one group of people is allowed to use it, and they can use it in so many different ways. Like if a white person says that word, it's racist and toxic, but a black person can use it, and it could be a punchline, it could be a term of endearment, it could be lyrics to a rap song, it could be a positive affirmation. It's a very unusual word, but it's not my word to use.
So this is a question for black people on if they're willing to accept this apology, right? Not my opinion to say. What he's saying so far is, fairly accurate. It is a unique word, and another word does not exist like it. And he's saying, man, in the past, this is how I said it, but it's going to take us to this Planet of the Apes remark, which is by far the worst thing he's ever said, all right?
I'm well aware of that now, but for years I used it in that manner. I never used it to be racist because I'm not racist.
Now here, this last remark that he said,
But whenever you're in a situation where you have to say, I'm not racist, you fucked up. And I clearly have fucked up.
Clearly.
And that's my intention to express myself in this video, to say, there's nothing I can do to take that back. I wish I could. Obviously, that's not possible. I do hope that, if anything, that this can be a teachable moment. Because I never thought it would ever be taken out of context and put in a video like that. And now that it is, holy shit, it looks bad.
Those of you guys that are watching, is the excuse that, hey, I said these words, not in a derogatory way towards black people or about black people. I said these words quoting maybe other black people or just saying the word instead of swapping it out to say the N-word. Do you guys think that that's a reasonable apology, specifically folks from the black community? Because again, it's their word. I want to hear from them on if somebody is saying it, not trying to be a rapper and trying to say cool, but saying it as like I'm quoting Paul Mooney, like. Does that in any way soften the blow? I'm curious to hear from you guys. Now let's watch the rest of this.
And it's part of also me doing this podcast for thousands of hours, thousands of episodes over 12 years. I said a lot of fucking stupid shit, which is fine when you're talking about most things, but not when you're talking about race. And there's another clip that I have to address.
And I think this to me is probably the worst of it, okay?
There's a clip from 11 years ago. I was telling a story on the podcast about how me and my friend Tommy and his girlfriend, we got really high. We were in Philadelphia, and we went to go see Planet of the Apes. And we didn't know where we were going. We just got dropped off by a cab, and we got dropped off in this all-black neighborhood. And I was trying to make the story entertaining, and I said, we got out, and it was like we were in Africa.
Yeah.
Like we were in Planet of the Apes. I did not, nor would I ever say that black people are apes, but it sure fucking sounded like that. And I immediately afterwards said, that's a racist thing to say. Planet of the Apes wasn't even in Africa. I was just saying there's a lot of black people there. But then I went on to talk about what a positive experience it was and how much fun it was to go to see this movie in a black neighborhood.
So I didn't watch that entire clip, but he's saying here, hey, this is what I said. I immediately corrected myself afterwards, saying it was not okay to say this. I didn't see that part. I don't know if you guys somebody went and dug up the whole thing in context. Maybe that's what he said. And he says, and then I went on to say how fun it was to go watch Planet of the Apes in a black neighborhood. Okay. Nevertheless, by far, I think the worst thing than just quoting, quote unquote, quoting the N-word. And he seems, again, black folks, this is from you guys. Does this seem to be an acceptable apology? That's what I'm curious of.
It wasn't a racist story, but it sounded terrible. And
see, I think he should have said no. It was racist for me to say apes and black people. I think that he could have owned that.
Said you can have clunky stories about anything, but not about race. And so I deleted that whole podcast, but obviously somebody made a clip out of it and taken out of context. It looks terrible, but it looks terrible even in context. It's a fucking idiotic thing to say, and I was just trying to be entertaining. I certainly wasn't trying to be racist, and I certainly would never want to offend someone for entertainment with something as stupid as racism. My hope is that, look, I can't go back in time and change what I've said. I wish I could. Obviously, that's not possible. But I do hope that this can be a teachable moment for anybody that doesn't realize how offensive that word can be coming out of a white person's mouth, in context or out of context. My sincere and humble apologies. I wish there was more that I could say, but all of this is just me talking from the bottom of my heart. It makes me sick watching that video, but hopefully at least some of you will accept this and understand where I'm coming from. My apologies and much love. My sincere apologies.
His sincere, deepest apologies. Again, it's more question for black folks. Do you guys accept the apology? What do you guys think? Was it genuine? So on and so forth. Here's the thing. This isn't the first time this has came up. This has came up before. Many of us who've been listening to Joe on and off have seen these clips floating around as early as like 2016, 2017. So this isn't new. This is old. The worst clip by far is the Planet of the Apes thing. And I'm going to ask you guys a question towards the end of this video that I actually genuinely want to hear from you guys about regarding that. Now that I think is about 12 years old, 10 or 12 years old. He says he took it down. I believe he's apologized for this before. Don't know. So that's a question I have for you guys that I'm really curious about now. There's two things. There's just two things, and I'm gonna get to my opinion. The first part is a white person ever saying the word out loud, regardless of context? Is it always never dismissible? And if that's the case, are we going to hold everybody to the same standard? That's question number one. Okay, so that's the first question I have to ask. Is it always never, you can never say the word out loud? And if that's the case, which I'm cool with, by the way, like I don't say the word out loud. I think I've said the word in 20 years, right? If that's the case, is it going to have just scales for everybody? And this is what I mean. Just scales for everybody. Here's the context of Hotep Jesus. He's been on here. He's a black conservative. And this is what he put up with regards to this word.
Two Joes said the N-word. Joe Biden and Joe Rogan. Now, when Joe Biden said it, y'all ain't had nothing to say. Now you got Joe Rogan saying it. Now you got something to say. Well, guess what? We ain't canceling Joe Rogan. Cancel Joe Biden. How about them apples?
So that's what Hotep Jesus said. And then Sagar from Breaking Points also put it up, and he said, the efforts to smear Joe Rogan as a racist is one of the most despicable efforts I've ever seen in my lifetime. They don't actually care. They're just trying to destroy him. We either live in a society where context matters or we don't. By their standard, Joe Biden is a racist. And I looked this clip up, and Joe Biden is absolutely using the N-word. There's loops of it going around. Is there now a double standard? If the standard is white folks are never allowed to say it, are we then looking the other way? There's some hypocrisy there. I mean, we have to admit that part. We have to admit that if that's the standard, which I'm okay with that being the standard. I'm okay with that being the standard. I've fought for that standard. I've told all my white friends, don't you ever say the N-word around me. It's not okay for you. I've had those weird conversations. Well, who are you to tell my black friends? I've had those conversations. But if that's the standard, well then, you gonna keep that same energy for Joe Biden? Okay, that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Okay. Now, the second part that I wanna ask you guys, and again, here's the second part. If someone says something stupid and racially insensitive and dumb and just completely inappropriate, where is that cutoff period between them, quote unquote, getting canceled or discarded? Where is that cutoff period? This is a genuine question. The Planet of the Apes thing, which is by far the stupidest thing in my opinion that he said, that's really bad. Okay, if that's what is the worst thing, which I think genuinely speaking we would agree. Where is that cutoff? Like, where do we say no? This is bad, right? Where is that cutoff? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 20 years? Right? Where is that cutoff? Because I think that becomes a crucial question. And somebody told me, hey, you can't do whatever you want, because if you do whatever you want and you say something crazy, you can lose your job. I agree. I think the caveat here is this isn't Joe's job. Joe owns the podcast. Joe owns the IP of the podcast. Spotify license it and distributes it. So there is no employee-employer relationship. That's one. Two, the part that I would ask is, do you want to live in a world and in a society where something you said 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago can come back to bite you and get you canceled, or if you're working a job, get you fired? It's Joe Rogan. He's anti-vax and right. And again, made a video about that, made multiple videos about that, shared videos, people debunking the doctors he had on. I totally disagree with him. I disagree with Joe Rogan about his views on Christianity. I've repeatedly said that. I've repeatedly made multiple videos about it. But here is the thing. Do you want to live in a world where because of something you said, some stupid thing you said that was completely sinful 12 years ago, 10 years ago, is going to get you fired? Is going to get you ostracized, is going to get you publicly drugged? Is that the kind of world we want to live in? And is that helpful? Like, is that healthy for society? Is that wise? I don't know. I don't think so. I remember the Kevin Hart thing. How many of you guys remember the Kevin Hart? Kevin Hart said his dream, and Dave Chappelle talked about that. Kevin Hart said his dream was to host the Oscars. And what happened? He got announced to host the Oscars, and then somebody dug up something he said about his son not being gay from literally 2008, 2009. And guess what? Kevin Hart apologized and was not able to host the Oscars, right? Or he pulled out from hosting the Oscars. Like, is that when it comes to grace and mercy, which, by the way, from my experience, and again, this is just my experience, black folks, specifically black Christians, are by far the most gracious, compassionate, merciful folks that I've ever been around in my life, right? And so for black folks, like, does that now discard Joe? Does that now remove him completely from any type of public platform? And again, my bias here, just so you guys know my bias, I'm gonna be fully transparent. Joe Rogan built this thing from a spare bedroom in his home. The largest podcast in the world, which reaches more people than MSNBC, Fox News, CNN combined, was built from a comedian's spare bedroom because he was on Fear Factor, squirreled up some money, and was able to do what he wanted with his podcast. And my bias is, I think that's extremely necessary for society. As much as I disagree with Joe Rogan on a number of things, I think that is so necessary that there can be people that rise up without machines, without mainstream media, and organically impact culture and society in the way that he has, despite the fact that I absolutely disagree with him on a number of things. And there's some things I do disagree with him as well. Okay, so something rising up organically and becoming bigger than anything he's ever done, I have a vested interest in that being allowed, even with people I disagree with on God, on the vaccine, on all kinds of things. Okay, that's my bias here. Fully transparent. And so, if they're coming for him because him having two wonky doctors on, and I've repeatedly, anytime he's talked about it, I've repeatedly tagged solid doctors. Hey, you need to have these people on. I don't know if he sees my tweets, but you need to have these people on. Z-Dog, you need to have other people on to provide an alternative to the stuff that you're putting on, because this Robert Malone and this other Dr. Phil, very, very not good information, very potentially harmful. I've said that before. I've said this on the channel before, okay? But if Rogan gets deplatformed, do you understand the slippery slope that can create for people who hop on and share their opinions on things, even if their opinion is wrong? Do you and again, is that the world that we want to live in? Is that the world that we want to live in? And best believe there is absolutely a concerted effort by people in the mainstream media whose ratings are tanking, whose views are tanking, trying to get stuff like this deplatformed. Absolutely. 100%. Right? And next, they're going to come after the Breaking Point's independent news media, Sagar and Crystal, that I actually support monthly. They're going to come after that. And so where's the line drawn if you have an opinion that's countercultural, if you have an opinion that's not, quote unquote, mainstream, and you say something, even on the entire gender conversation, right? Is that then opening up people? Because eventually they're going to come for you. Eventually you're going to say something and it's going to be alt-right or whatever, right? And by the way, Rogan is not a conservative. And I don't mean like in the Tim Pool way. I mean like the dude is not a conservative. Like, look up my video on him and Ben Shapiro and him checking Ben Shapiro on systemic racism. Okay? He sounded awfully woke in that interview. He's had the people from the folks from, what is that called? The Justice Project on repeatedly, right? So this is not someone that you're going to position to be the next Trump. That's not what this is. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what this is. So I think we have to be very careful with, this is not someone that's on the fringes. This is actually someone that's more of a moderate, leans left. And because he doesn't fall in line with certain specific ways of doing things, they're attempting to get him deplatformed. I don't think that is healthy. I don't think that is how a society is going to thrive in regards to that. And so my question, genuinely, folks from the Black community, I want to hear from you guys. Is this something you can look past? Do you think he deserves to not have a platform? Because it's different. You say, yeah, I don't really fool with him, but you know what? I think he should still have his podcast. It's different than saying, I think they should remove the podcast. That's different. Now and all my point is, that is entering some very dangerous territory. That is entering some very slippery slopes that as a society, we have to be careful. Because here's the thing. If Rogan gets deplatformed, another more wild, further radical version of him is going to rise up. And they're going to tiptoe with the lines and they're going to figure it out. That's the dangerous part about trying to get people deplatformed and canceled. It's somebody else, except now it won't be where there's discourse of two sides happening. Now it's going to be somebody that's going to be in some weird corner of the internet, and it's going to be way worse. I promise you it's going to be way worse. Okay? That is the danger of attempting to get folks and take their platforms away, especially when their platform isn't owned or controlled by any investors, any mainstream media, or any cosigns or shout-outs. That is dangerous, friends. So, as followers of Jesus, again, quite a few things I disagree with Rogan on. Wish he would have more Christian guests. I wish he'd have better doctors on. However, in my opinion, I'm praying for him. I'm hoping that he navigates this well. I'm hoping he has better guests on. I'm hoping this humbles him and allows him to have more diverse conversations. I would love to see Neil Young on there. I would love to see India Ari come on. I would love to see him interview his critics and really sit and listen to them. And he's done that with the CNN doctor, except the issue with the CNN doctor is apparently the dude's never had a 3-hour conversation and got completely just destroyed by Joe Rogan, who, by the way, was later corrected by a different guest about myocarditis in the heart, and then tweeted out articles that Sagar shared with him, debunking some of the stuff that was said on his podcast. So it's not like he's unreasonable. You know what I mean? So those are my thoughts on this, man. Back to India Ari. I think she's right. Here's the thing. Both people can be right in this situation. India Ari can be right in that I'm not fooling with a platform that is built on the back of artists and pays us a third of a penny per stream. I'm not fooling with that. I want my music up. I'm like, let's go. I'm with you. Next album ain't going on Spotify for me either. Yeah. However, the flip side is, okay, is Rogan wrong for having conversations? We're talking about conversations. We're talking about words, right? We're talking about conversations. Is Rogan wrong for having conversations? I don't think so. And all this. And as Christians, again, remember, at some point, you might say something and stand on scripture and what you think scripture is playing about, and they might come for you and say, that's hate speech. Can't say that. Right? And I think that is the part that's dangerous in this whole situation. So kudos to India Ari for pulling her music, by all means. And kudos to you. If you want to cancel your Spotify, cancel your Spotify. Cancel it. Don't listen. Don't use the platform. If you feel so strongly about it, don't use the platform. I'm not mad at you for that. However, if you want this man deplatformed because he's dangerous, fam, you haven't been keeping up with mainstream media for the past couple years. You haven't been keeping up with all the misinformation happening on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox. If you think they're telling you the truth, if you think there's no misinformation and disinformation on those platforms, friends, you are very naive. You are very, very naive. If you don't think they're omitting stuff from you, constantly omitting. Here's an example, and this is not me to rag on somebody. Here's an example, and Sagar and Crystal just did a thing on this. They did a whole thing on how one of the biggest variables in terms of comorbidity on if someone passes from the thing, you know what I'm talking about, right? The vid, is obesity. And guess what? Our country is the most obese of any Western nation. And guess what? Our fatality rates are higher. And no one is going to tell you that. No mainstream outlet, the New York Times did a whole thing, and it's all about boosters. It's all about boosters. And it's like, yeah, I got it, okay? But we're not going to talk about like the massive elephant in the room, no pun intended, of our kids being more obese, our adults being more obese. Like, we're not going to talk about that when that's one of the most direct comorbidities attached to somebody passing from this thing. Right? You don't think they're omitting information from you and lying to you? Right? You don't think that's dangerous? Oh, yeah, go get the booster. Yeah. No one's telling you, hey, go take your vitamins. No one's telling you, hey, go exercise. Go, right? Everybody, every voice, every influencer, every YouTube channel has something in an area where they fall short in. They have an area they fall short in. That just is what it is. It is what it is, right? And if you think there's perfect people here, well, then goodness gracious, I don't think you understand how depraved the human heart really is and how there are no good guys or bad guys. There are no us and them. There's just stupid, dumb people who are going to mess it up, be messy, blow it, drop the ball, say stupid things. And there's Jesus, one good guy. All of us are messed up and one good guy. And so to which degrees people are messed up, right? That could be discussed. I don't think this is a degree where you deplatform someone. I think if you don't want to listen, don't listen. If you want to cancel Spotify, I'm all for the market. Let the market decide. Cancel your Spotify. But to assume that there's degrees of this person is worse than this person is worse than this person, fam, it's a dangerous way to look at the world, and that's why the gospel is that much more important. Joe Rogan's no worse or no better than MSNBC or CNN. They're all jacked up. Any influencer, myself included, I'm gonna come on here, I might say something, I might misspeak, I might say something wrong, I might say something I gotta clean up later. I don't think I'll ever say anything as wild as that Planet of the Apes thing, but we're all jacked up, man, and that's why we need Jesus, because we're all bad guys, messed up, and Jesus comes and says, I'm gonna live the life you couldn't live, die to death you should have died in your place on the cross, so that you may have a pathway to the Father. That's a beautiful thing. That is the good news. Amen? It's not about Joe Rogan. It's about what Joe Rogan represents. And if someone's wrong, the best way to combat bad speech is with better speech. The best way to combat misinformation is with better information. And I've been doing this about the bang bang, about fitness for a long time on this platform, right? So I don't think it's about Joe Rogan. I think it's, hey, when someone says something that's wrong, how do we deal with it? One. Two, if what you deem as appropriate is dismissed as wrong by the masses, that opens you up to potentially getting deplatformed at some point. And three, are you okay with something from 12 years ago being used against you today and getting you fired from your job today? Is that the world we want to create? Joe Biden absolutely used the N-word. You guys could go all look it up after this. Absolutely used the N-word in the same way Joe Rogan used it. Absolutely. That is a fact. In Congress. What are you gonna do with that one? We gonna cancel the president? Follow Jesus, not Joe, not Whoopi. The Lord will show us the way. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out. I appreciate y'all, man. Y'all.
Kingstream Entertainment. Ruslan.
Yo, thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. If you'd like to see other videos like this, check out over here, including a video I did about Joe Rogan correcting Ben Shapiro on systemic racism. Also, be sure to check out the links in the description about free Master My YouTube training, free Master My Niche training, and a free Master My Habits course I put together with my therapist, Dr. Rudy. All right, I love you guys.